My name's Melissa Wagacy, and I'm the Associate Director of Development for the College of Communication Arts and Sciences, a college devoted to storytelling and the way we communicate and connect. As MSU moved to online instruction this spring, we also watched our alumni quickly adapt and pivot. We discovered that people are quite interested in the behind-the-scenes aspects of different ComArtSci careers during this time, which generated this webinar series about media and communication careers pivoting in the pandemic. That leads to today's fifth ComArtSci Talks Automotive Industry. We're excited to provide this opportunity and conversation. Thank you for the questions submitted in advance. Attendees will note that your microphone and video camera will be off. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout through the Q&A function, and we'll moderate that as we go. Also, please make sure that you tag us today with hashtag ComArtSci Talks. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our host for the hour, Robbie Rattan, Associate Professor and AT&T Scholar in MSU's Department of Media and Information. Dr. Rattan conducts research on the effects of human-technology interaction, including autonomous vehicles. He received his PhD from USC and his master's and undergraduate degrees from Stanford. Thank you, Robbie, for hosting today. With that, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our esteemed alumni panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited and honored to be hosting today. So let's get right to it. I'd like to introduce this excellent panel who has very interesting perspectives to share with you on the automotive industry and professional pivots, as in professional pandemic pivots. I like the alliteration that you guys titled this with. So Andrea Brimmer, Chief Marketing and Public Relations Officer at Ally Financial. She has a BA in advertising from our college, and when working with Chevrolet, she launched the iconic American Revolution campaign. You might remember the Heartbeat of America slogan. Then Jim Houston, Chief Revenue Officer of Auto Alert, and he has a BA in advertising from our college, and also is currently a strategic communications master's student here at MSU. And he's an automotive industry veteran with 3 decades in senior executive roles. And last but not least, Jeff Rocker, Chief Executive Officer of Berkshire Hathaway Automotive, and he directly reports to Warren Buffett, who you might have heard of. And he has a BA in communication and a wide range of experience in the automotive sector, from dealership groups to aftermarket retailers. So this is a great group of people from whom we can learn a lot about how the automotive industry is pivoting post-pandemic. Those P's again. So I'm going to kick it off with a question, and I have a few backups, but those of you in the audience, please feel free to write your own questions into the Q&A window over on the side there. All right, so, and we can go in any order, but we can also go in the order in which I just introduced you, but feel free to go back and forth to make the conversation more interactive. So will you please describe your slice of the automotive sector pre-COVID, and then talk about how that has changed since COVID?
Jeff, you want to start?
I'll be glad to. First off, Robbie, it's certainly an honor to be a part of this panel today with my esteemed colleagues and industry friends, Jim and Andrea. In terms of our pre-COVID slice of the automotive sector, Berkshire Hathaway Automotive is one of the largest dealership groups in the country. We represent about 1% of the market of new vehicles sold in the USA, and a little over that in terms of franchised used vehicles that are sold. And prior to COVID, we were enjoying really a multi-year strength in terms of macro tailwinds in our industry. Really was the best of times in the automotive sector. In fact, January and February had 2020 off on an all-time record pace. And then it was late February that we were following the COVID story at our company, and we started a multifunctional task force to get prepared as we saw the trajectory of the virus and its impact. And obviously in early March, mid-March, our industry, like a lot of the U.S. economy, fell into a virtual free fall. And one of the things that came out of our task force was a commitment to make our number one priority the safety of our associates, our customers, our vendors, our OEM partners, and our communities. And so that's been our North Star, and that guided us to really pivot at the dealership level to change our processes and protocols with a real emphasis on safety and sanitization and a real effort on adapting the customer experience for this new environment. And part of that new environment meant that many of our dealership markets were under some form of a closure, a stay at home or a shelter in place order. Our dealerships were at least partially closed. Fortunately, service and parts were deemed an essential service, but our sales operations were materially shuttered. We were limited to really a skeleton crew and more of an appointment-only digital retailing, pickup and delivery type operation. And so that is how COVID really impacted the pivot, if you will, in automotive dealerships across the U.S. And that's how our company adapted. I'm very proud of our associates, again, that changed up process and really leveraged technology to be sure that we had a user experience and a customer experience that gave customers comfort and enabled them to do as much of the transaction as possible online in the comfort of their home, including even delivering a vehicle if necessary. So a long answer, but that's kind of the pre and post-COVID insight to what's happening at Berkshire Hathaway Automotive, and I think largely the retail auto industry at large.
Hey, Robbie, I can jump in next. Jeff and Jim, it's good to see you guys, and excited to be here with everybody from Michigan State today. In terms of Ally Financial, kind of just explaining where we fit into the automotive landscape in general. We are one of the largest auto finance companies in the country. We have over 5 million customers that we finance their vehicles through dealers. So our primary customers are dealers. We work with over 18,000 dealers across the country. At Jeff and the good folks at Berkshire Hathaway, good customers of ours as well. And so not only do we finance customer cars, vehicles, but for the dealerships themselves, we do the wholesale inventory. We finance their rooftops, so their insurance on their physical structures, and we sell a host of F&I products. So I would say relative to just the landscape of the automotive industry, think of us as one of the major arteries of the financing heart in the industry. Kind of pre and post COVID, relative to post COVID for us, we're a digital bank, which actually in this period of time right now works really nicely. It makes things a little bit easier. Post COVID, our focus has really been around how do we help both our dealers and our customers with forbearance packages that would allow them to have some breathing room, particularly for customers that lost their jobs. So we offered probably the most sweeping forbearance package in the industry, 120 days, suspension of payments for auto customers, and very similar types of terms on the dealer side as well. Suspension of all of their payments into us, whether it was wholesale payments, inventory payments, rooftop payments, insurance payments, etc. We've also really tried to provide a comprehensive package of tools to help dealers not only navigate through in terms of customer interaction during the shutdown periods, but now as many are emerging out of the shutdown, a comprehensive package of marketing tools so that they can start to gain awareness, bring customers back into the dealerships, and also help them with contactless delivery and some of those kinds of things. So that just gives you a sense of kind of how we navigate it and who we are in the industry.
Well, as Andrea said, it's great to be on this panel with friends here from Michigan State and our industry. Auto Alert, just quickly give you a little bit of a sense of who we are. We're a software as a service company. Our focus is entirely the automotive industry. I remember, funny enough, Jeff and I were in Las Vegas in early February. Andrea was in Daytona Beach, I believe, for the Daytona 500, urging on her car to victory. And I think you got rained out for one day, and I don't remember what happened on the second day. But
had to go home on the second day, unfortunately.
Our industry has a national convention, and that was in early February. And in early February, there was just a bit of a hint of what was happening around the globe, but had really not affected us at any point. And it really wasn't even a conversation per se. As Jeff had said, we'd come off of a string of record years in the industry. Our business, Auto Alert's business, was at a record high. We had nothing but great visions of grandeur in 2020. And that flipped 180 degrees in a matter of about 2 weeks. We returned. Our headquarters is in Kansas City. I work remotely. I'm based here in Detroit, Harrison Township up on Lake St. Clair. But the executive team raced back to Kansas City late February to begin plans for what we could see was coming on the horizon. And fortunately enough, we're a company of about 500 people. Almost all of us are on laptops. Many worked in shifts because we have a lot of programmers and developers. A lot of people would work their own schedules. So we were probably 90% ready for a remote environment. Our concern, as Jeff had said, and Andrea said, was a lot for our employees, their families. We had a lot of families. We have a lot of young people in the organization, a lot of families just starting. So it was a great concern that we made the atmosphere safe for them. So as February rolled into early March, we started to implement a work from home process. So ultimately, I believe the day was around the 16th or 17th of March. I was in Florida for a meeting with several of our dealers. Actually, I think I emailed you, Jeff, for a recommendation on dinner in Delray Beach. Literally by the next day, they had shut down most of Florida, and I ended up flying back to Detroit. Interestingly enough, our software works for car dealerships and their customer databases, linking customers to their finance companies like Ally, to the dealership personnel, offering up a series of opportunities on how their owners can move into new vehicles or used vehicles, or the service department. And that, in essence, customer relationship system has always been built to work remotely. But it was never really a selling feature, because who would have ever thought we would have been in a position that a dealership would be closed more than one day or 2 days in Detroit sometimes, but certainly not months and months on end where you were appointment only. So the pivot we made with our personnel was moving everybody home. The pivot we made with our business was literally an education process to work with dealerships all across the United States. We have thousands of customers across the U.S. Jeff, several of his stores are on our program. And we were able to enable them in their remote environment to tap into the database and work with their customers to find solutions. And of course, as Jeff and I have learned, and Andrea, thank goodness she's younger than we are, But we've all been through way too many of these events, whether it was the financial crisis, the oil crisis, all those events that had impact on our business, but nothing to the level of this, nothing to the implications of closures or partial openings or appointment only. So we've been fortunate as a company. We had our dings, there's no doubt. We gave our customers as many discounts as we could to keep them in business. But it really was a great transition for us to understand that the foundation of our software platform actually became quite useful in the remote environment. And we're looking forward to getting out of this. I think Jeff had some good words early on. Very cautiously, we saw a quick rebound immediately in retail business. The pent-up demand, they call it, right? The people that had leases coming due. But it's going to be a soft rollout as people become more comfortable with even getting outside and doing things. We've seen that surge of enthusiasm as restaurants open and bars open and stores open. But I think all of us would say that everyone is being extremely cautious as we slowly work our way through this and understanding the implications.
All right. Very interesting, and thank you all. I'm going to turn to an audience member question from Johannes Bauer, my colleague and my former chair of my department, who does research on governance and economics in kind of internet and other mediated contexts. So he has a great perspective on the future of technological landscapes, and his question I think maybe gets at a larger anxiety than just the pandemic. This is something people have been talking about in the automotive industry for a while. Do you anticipate or have any evidence that the social distancing experience and the stay-at-home, stay-safe experience will motivate auto owners, and I guess thus the industry, to reconsider ownership and possibly rely more on car sharing and ride-hailing models in the future?
I'll be glad to take that, Robbie, and I would actually say quite the contrary. I think that that COVID-19 will likely have a net negative impact on ride sharing. I think it's common sense to think about a consumer entering a vehicle, not knowing who was just in that vehicle, not knowing what kind of sanitation standards the owner of that vehicle has, not knowing if the driver is a potential carrier of the virus, etc. And so I think you're going to see tremendous pressure on ride sharing, on public transit, etc. And I think that consumers more than ever are going to see their vehicles as a very safe personal space. And I think this is one of the silver linings for traditional vehicle ownership. I also think that people are going to really embrace drive versus fly vacationing and travel, as there be an ongoing apprehension about drawing the middle seat on a commuter flight. And so, again, that's a long answer. But in terms of ride sharing, I think their numbers are way, way down. And I think that it's likely that they are going to come back slowly because of people's reluctance to get in and out of a vehicle that they don't have confidence or clarity in terms of its, again, sanitation and safety. My thoughts.
Yeah, I totally agree with Jeff. The other point that I would add to that, which I think is going to be material and interesting, particularly on ride sharing, is that a lot of what you're kind of seeing in terms of at least early numbers is that people have an intention of moving out of urban areas and migrating more out into, more wide open spaces, more rural areas. And that will tend to also have, I think, a significant impact on ride sharing and the autonomous industry in general. I think that you're going to see a lot of changed behaviors, especially the longer that this progresses, and as people move out of spaces with high density, like a New York City or a downtown Chicago or those kind of areas, and start to take that flight out to the country in places like where I live, I think that will obviously have the very opposite effect in terms of the growth that we've seen on ride sharing.
Well, you just think about what this forced many of our companies to understand was you can effectively use technology to work remotely and collaborate. I can tell you our CTO, Tom Walls, has seen his production of his group of 150 developers and programmers jump 60% in this environment. We're in mid-product launch back in February. We were able to move up our launch date 3 months just because of productivity. Now, with that, will probably go some burnout as well. But I think we've adjusted our lifestyle to understand that we can work collaboratively with technology. And as Andrea was just saying, the urban flight, so to speak, away from these centers of population is going to affect that. I think we've also seen, and I have these conversations every day with our OEM partners, General Motors, Ford, for those that don't know the acronym. They're talking about exactly the same thing. They're seeing data that shows for the next 6 months, people are doing what we did, what Jeff and I and Andrea did when we were young, hop in the station wagon and drive to the coast. We didn't hop on airplanes. We rented homes. We stayed on the beach. The camping industry, I was just talking to a great friend at Camping World, one of the owners up at Camping World. He was talking about the boom in the camping industry. They're not even able to keep them in stock. People are either renting or buying as they are going to rediscover this. So I think you're going to see a big shift, as Jeff said. The other thing is the investment in autonomous. A lot of those investment dollars are going to support the current industry and the downturn in business. So any of that investment is getting pushed off. I think you're not going to see a lot of these launches that were forecasted for 2021, 2022, 2023 across the entire landscape. A lot of those investment dollars are being pushed off. I think electric will still be in the near-term future, but I think autonomy is going to take a pivot as well. And I don't think it's in the right direction, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be, in their minds, it's going to be pushed off.
That's a great segue, Jim. Thank you. Into the next question from Charlie Bogart, who asks, how will your overall budgets change and shift with these new and different times? Increase in technology spend, work from home needs, shift in marketing budget, decrease in overall costs. So I think he's suggesting some potential sub-questions there, but anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I can start first, particularly from, I think, the marketing perspective. I think all companies are still in a very fluid situation and are still trying to figure out the true impact of COVID. While there was a swift and immediate impact, particularly on stock performance, now that things are somewhat normalizing, I think that you're starting to see a different picture being painted. Jeff can probably speak to this, but at least at Ally, I know that our business is exceptionally strong. Our business on the bank side, our deposits are extremely strong. We had a record day on Friday on our Invest platform, which is our platform where people can do stock trading, our largest day ever. And interestingly, our auto volumes are very analogous to what they were last year, if not slightly elevated. And last year was a record year. So, for us, the difference is that we gave people 4 months of forbearance. So, we don't have payments coming in for the collateral that we have out. So we still need to assess, the impact of that situation. And so I think a lot of people are in a bit of a wait and see mode. How are we going to come out of this? We personally have taken some shifts in terms of our marketing budget, but not predicated on the Ally financial situation, largely predicated on the fact that so much of media has been canceled and is evaporated out of the marketplace. So there are a lot of things that I couldn't even go buy if I wanted to. So for instance, think about large investments in live sports, there are no live sports right now. You know, we sponsored things like NFL, college football. We're a big NASCAR sponsor, NBA. The list goes on. Those things have evaporated with the exception of NASCAR, which has just returned. So you can't go buy a lot of that media. There's no original production going on right now. So the networks are going to be in a really interesting situation come fall as they enter into the upfronts from a marketer perspective, because that programming is not going to exist and marketers are going to want to spend a lot of money on old programming. So there's a lot of fluidity. The word I keep using with my team is just choppy. As a marketer, I have never seen a year like this, where we're literally having check-ins at least 3 times a week with our agencies and my direct report team to figure out almost on a week-by-week basis, what should the message in the marketplace be? How should the media match it? And how should the spend levels be commensurate with that?
Yeah, very insightful comments from Andrea. And just to piggyback on that, certainly this is a time of tremendous agility, or at least I think that agility and the ability to be nimble is critically important. We've seen in late March and April what I would characterize as a flash depression in our industry and maybe even in the broader economy. April, we had the lowest SAR in the auto industry's history, an 8.6 million unit SAR. And yet, as Andrea just foreshadowed, in the month.
Tell us what a SAR is.
Okay, so seasonally, it's basically an acronym that highlights how you measure volume in the auto industry, the strength of the new vehicle sales in our industry. It stands for seasonally adjusted annual selling rate. So order of magnitude, the last several years have been in the 17 million unit range. Again, a record cycle for our industry, all-time highs. And imagine in the month of April, an 8.6 million SAR, that improved sequentially in May to about 12 million units, and I believe it'll improve again sequentially in the month of June. But again, after this flash depression that we experienced in late March and April, we've seen kind of a flash recovery, particularly on the pre-owned vehicle side. And if you go back and look at some of the previous financial crises or economic crises, 9/11, the 09, 010 crisis, used cars was a leading indicator coming out of those cycles as well. But to get back to your question about budgeting, at our company, we're always focused on being as efficient and productive as we can be and really emphasize cost effectiveness. But we obviously looked at everything. That was part of what that task force I formed took on as an early assignment. And one of the things we did address was our marketing budgets and really just doubled down on digital. We already have a significant investment in digital spending. We went away from a lot of the traditional media investment that Andrea highlighted during this cycle of uncertainty. And we have seen through our own data that the amount of transactions done via the internet or derived from an internet lead are at an all-time high. And I think that's intuitive. People are sitting at home and they're shopping from their desktop, their iPad, their iPhone. And so investing in search and investing in digital assets is what we've done from a marketing standpoint. We leave it up to our individual dealerships, but obviously they've looked at staffing to demand to, again, make sure that we're efficient and productive. And of course, whenever you're faced with a economic cycle like this, you really look at all non-essential spend and CapEx and do everything you can to eliminate it unless it's 100% muscle and you can see a direct return on those investments. And I'm pleased to report that one of the many silver linings of the COVID crisis from a business standpoint is that we've learned as a company to do a lot more with a lot less. And our dealerships have learned to be a lot more productive and efficient with a lot less. And we actually believe that post-COVID, we'll be able to maintain those high levels of efficiency and productivity and remain mean and lean, if you will, which I think is important, again, to keep that agility when we're going to be looking to a future that's still going to have a lot of uncertainty. Jim,
Thank
what are
you.
your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm kind of a mugwump in this conversation. So Andrea and I shared the agency industry background for many years. I was with the Ford agency, and then I was with the GM agency, similar to Andrea. So I spent 20 years, we refer to it as above the line business, TV, radio, newspaper, all the glorious, beautiful commercials we produce. And then I spent the last 20 years, what I call below the line, more in direct marketing, database marketing, data mining, software. Andrea made a great point. You know, all the live programming that we're so used to each and every day, and as we've all been kind of trapped in our homes, and ESPN keeps running the 1984 this and the 1986 that. There is one thing I cannot watch on TV, and that's them replaying games, other than when Magic Johnson beat Larry Bird back when we were getting ready to finish up our college career. Jeff remembers well. You watch that forever, but all the rest of the program not. It's going to change, I believe, network television for a very long time. And the programming, the dearth of programming, and we heard it, I think it was last week, I think we had the production team on, I saw that. It's going to be interesting, the volume of content that has been replayed over and over again. Now, of course, it increased a lot of demand for content, which is probably good for those that produce it. But our focus in our company, and needless to say, we're not an outbound marketer per se. We're a business-to-business entity. But I will tell you that the pivot we made as an organization and how we're approaching our business model with our retail partners across the industry and with our financial partners and with the OEMs, with General Motors and Ford, is taking a very, very hard look at what we can do to help, as Jeff was talking, help our retail partners be more efficient in their efforts of working with their customers and with their, we call them conquest, but new customers looking at vehicles, and create an environment of security when they're working remotely, identification of the people that are looking to do a test drive from home, a lot of the elements built around the security of the data and the transactional nature of the data to enable them to be lean, for them to be able to work remotely, whether it's from a virtual business development center where they have operators talking to their customers, whatever it may be, and with the security of knowing that their databases aren't open to the entire world. So we shifted our marketing emphasis to be more around security and that effort going forward to help them in their solutions as they go forward in the marketplace. But I think we're going to see a dramatic change in how marketing budgets are being spent at the tier 1 level, GM, Ford, Ally, at the tier 2 and 3 level, similar to what Jeff and Berkshire does and other dealer groups across the United States.
Thank you all. There are these great segues in the comments you're making in response to previous questions to new questions, and I'm going to try to merge two questions here. So Laura Elkin asked about the impact of drive vacationing on new car sales, but it seems like you already kind of answered that. People are buying more cars. The SAR is going up, not SARS. I thought that might have been a COVID joke. Or another coronavirus joke, but now we can avoid SARS and hope for good SAR. But then you also mentioned that you're going lean and you're shifting your attention toward digital. And the follow-up question from Gregory Hall is relevant to that, but he's asking maybe about the potential downside of that. How close or confident do you feel retail dealers are in the shift toward digital retailing? With state and local regulations that differ across states, how close are we nationally to having someone buy a car from start to finish online from a retail dealer? And does that concern the dealerships or the perspective of having the brick and mortar?
Yeah, I'll be glad to take that as a
Your alley.
follow-up. And first off, digital retailing was already a strong trend in our industry. I would say it was in its infancy, the early innings, but there was tremendous energy and investment focused on digital retailing in our industry from all stakeholders. Both Jim and Andrea's companies are certainly players in that landscape. And our company has put a lot of effort into trying to prepare and provide tools to the Berkshire Hathaway Automotive dealerships in hopes that we can be a leader in that space. Again, a silver lining of COVID is that, in my view, digital retailing adoption by consumers has accelerated significantly, and the usership for our employees that are serving customers, their adoption and their aptitude has also increased significantly. So I think that the digital retailing trend, again, is going to be a long-term trend that just got goosed, if you will, by the COVID crisis and the necessity that was created by the partial closures. I don't have any fear. Dealerships do have a lot of brick and mortar. We think that those real estate assets are strategic. Our research says, and you appropriately noted, that today, despite what some might represent, nobody can do 100% of an automobile transaction online. They can do the majority of that transaction online, but regrettably, as you noted, we're still having to work state by state on a number of regulatory considerations. There's still wet signatures required for some of the documents that Andrea's company might need, et cetera, et cetera. So we embrace at our company, and I think many in the industry have taken a similar strategy, what we call omnichannel. So we want to be sure that we have the tools, processes, and resources at our dealerships to serve the customer the way they want to be served. If they want to do 90% of the transaction online at their kitchen table, then we want to have the ability to serve them. If they want to do 10% of the transaction online and everything in between, we want to be able to accommodate the way that they'd like to be served. And yet, research confirms that most consumers still like to come to the brick and mortar dealership to complete the transaction and actually take physical delivery of their vehicle. We certainly have the capabilities to do an off-site delivery, a touchless delivery, as Andrea referred to it, I believe earlier. And we did more of those the last few months because of COVID-19. But again, our approach is being able to sell and service the consumers the way they want to be sold and serviced. And we believe this omni-channel approach will enable us to capture and serve all consumers' needs. But digital retailing, it is the future. Just quickly, at our company, we normally sell almost 60%, high 50s of all of the vehicles we sold that are derived from an internet lead. In COVID, that's up about 20%. So certainly digital retailing has traction, and it's here to stay.
Yeah, and I would add, I think not only in the auto industry, but in a lot of industries, which is going to be a really interesting offshoot of COVID. Think about the adaptation of, digital grocery shopping in our industry, digital banking. And like I said earlier, thankfully for us, we are a digital bank, all 100% online. But the flow of new customers coming in that we have seen is, really like record setting this year. And so I just think in general, people are trying things like a contactless delivery that they have never tried before. And they're realizing, wow, this is simple. It's easy. It's intuitive. I like it. Why would I go into a lot of places? Like a bank branch is a great example. Nobody looks forward to going into a bank branch. If you figure out that there's a way you don't ever have to do that again, why would you?
Yeah, I agree. I think consumers have been conditioned through their interactions with all kinds of retailers, service providers, restaurants, and that digital interaction is really now the price of admission. It's going to be an expectation of consumers, certainly as long as COVID is with us, but I believe forever and ever.
I think Andrea and Jeff are spot on. I can't add much more than that. I think that this pushed us over the edge in many ways, but positively, to get into the digital world, to experience how we can move through the digital world. And I think it's going to be an expectation of all of our businesses going forward, that you have the aspect of a full digital relationship available to anybody that wants it. You have a brick and mortar to those that want it. You know, there are people that want the interaction, there are people that don't. And it has pushed all of us into that realm, and the realization that we can still get those things done. So I absolutely agree across the board.
All right. I'm faced now as the moderator with difficult task of choosing which questions we have time to answer. There are more than I can put out here. So I'm actually going to seed two questions at once. The first one I think is actually a relatively factual question. It's a supply chain question. Tony Smihal writes, I'm hearing that dealers are running very low or they're on limited inventory. And so how do you see the larger supply chain, I guess, being affected, and will that influence sales? But then there's also a larger take a step back question from Matt McKenna here. He writes, congratulations on your post-MSU success. For the younger folks listening, what is the biggest learning lesson you took away from MSU that helped you achieve success in the industry? Two very different questions. Maybe we can get through the first one quickly and then transition into the second one smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff probably is in a better position to answer the first question, at least what they're seeing from a Berkshire Hathaway standpoint. But I know for us, from an Ally perspective, obviously, given our role in terms of wholesale financing, we look at inventories very closely. And yeah, I mean, the plants were closed. There's a suppression of inventory. I think that's why you're hearing Jeff say the market will pivot to used, and that market will get, very vibrant. I know that the plants are working hard to refill capacity. There's a lot of pent up demand, and with a lot of the great financing that's available, I think that's why you're seeing this tremendous flow right now. So this is going to be something that will be difficult for the OEMs to navigate. But dealers are scrappy, and they will figure out ways to buy cars at the auctions and put used in place of new where they have to keep businesses and keep cash flow going. That's at least our perspective.
Yeah, I could just chime in there and confirm that right now there is a structural shortage in new vehicles in the automotive industry, certainly in many of our dealerships. It is somewhat unique by brand, but virtually all brands have some models and commodities that are under a shortage, and certain brands are literally going to almost run out of cars for a short period. Certainly for the rest of the summer, I think there'll be a structural shortage of new cars that will prevent the industry from achieving its full SAR sales potential, if you will. But as Andrea said, the industry's already pivoted. Dealers are very nimble, entrepreneurial, and seem to always find a way to win. And that the online auctions are back up to pre-COVID sales in terms of their volumes, because car dealers are buying nearly new cars and other pre-owned vehicles. I think you'll see this month that pre-owned vehicle sales will actually get back to or slightly ahead of pre-COVID levels. New car sales over the next few months, I think, will be suppressed from their full potential because of the structural shortage we mentioned. But that's a temporary situation. I think it could last for a couple of quarters. I do think that there's some longer term supply chain implications that might not allow the industry to get to full production for a year or so. But frankly, we never needed to be at full production. I think we'll get back to competitive inventories within the next couple of quarters. I will take the second question quickly, and this may be a cliche answer or appear to be, but it's a very sincere and authentic answer. What did I learn at MSU? I was a communication major, as you announced in your opening comments, and I learned how to communicate. And nothing has been more important in leadership during a crisis like COVID than the ability to communicate with all different constituencies, transparently, frequently, and often. And I'll tell you just quickly, when we formed our task force in those early days of COVID, really the first 2 months, I had a 5 o'clock conference call every single night because it was critically important that our leadership team update one another, because it was so dynamic that we were getting new information hour by hour, literally. And obviously we had to assimilate, distill that down so that we could deliver the appropriate messaging and guidance to the broader employee population of our organization, as well as the importance of communicating with other key stakeholders like the OEM, supply chain, vendors, customers, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be my answer to the second follow-up question, Robbie.
I'll answer that part. I don't need to reflect on the business. Jeff and Andrea certainly commented on it appropriately, but I can echo what Jeff said. The education I got at Michigan State University prepared me how to speak, how to write, some of the things that a lot of people don't seem to do as much anymore, how to type. You have to reflect back to 79, 80, 81 when I was in school. We didn't have computers. We had word processing typewriters. But, and the fact that all of our coursework was real. It was not theoretical. We were giving speeches. We were writing documents. We were doing things in a very practical sense. And I fast forward 40 years, and you made a mention of it. I'm getting my master's in strategic communications right now at Michigan State. Actually had Dean David as one of my professors along the way. That's always tough. But again, all practical, all real. Feet on the street. You're learning what it is to do today. And it is during COVID, as Jeff said, I do a morning call every single morning at 10 a.m. with my entire executive team. I do a 5 p.m. call every afternoon with our sales team. And probably at least 3-4 times a week, I'm talking to our various vendors as well as our clients. And the ability to communicate was the absolute number one thing I took away.
Yeah, and I think for me, aside from never trust a Wolverine, I also learned. I was a student athlete, so I think probably the biggest thing for me was that combination of learning how to have exceptional organizational skills and how to deal with a lot of pressure, having to keep a very full academic schedule with a very full athletic schedule, and kind of the intersection of those things, which has prepared me very, very well for the business world, particularly in times like this. Because to Jeff's point, I think one of the offshoots here of COVID and this working from home has been that there's no boundaries in the day anymore. It's just one long day. It's like from the minute you get up until the minute you go to bed. Whatever time of the night that would be. I think people think because you're working from home, there's no problem to have a call at 7 p.m. at night. And, the business has dictated it a lot as well. We too have had, particularly at the onset, emergency calls. I mean, we did a, emergency management team at least 3 or 4 times a week, every evening, just to check in on every facet of the business and the customer communications and the brand sentiment and all those kinds of things. So that was something that I really felt like I was prepared well for when I got out into the real world, just the reality of dealing with a lot of different stuff coming at you.
All right. Let's shift to another general question from Jesse Morton. I think it's an interesting one, not entirely on topic, but maybe you can make it relevant to the topic. Jesse is curious about what you are all reading these days.
Emails. I mean, honestly, for me, I have pivoted to my focus right now has been around a lot of the social injustice, and we're doing a lot of listen and learn sessions. And I'm reading a lot of material that has been forwarded to me by many of my Black teammates, so that I can learn and I can evolve and I can understand more of a lot of what is happening in the world relative to deep-seated racism and actions that we can take to ensure that the world doesn't continue to progress that way. So that's really, I'm reading a lot of material on that right now, and consuming a lot of content, whether it's video content, social content, etc. Really on that topic right now.
Well, I got to be honest with all of you. I took the semester off as I was in the middle of my semester. I have 2 classes left for my master's. I wrap up this fall. And obviously January, February, March was an interesting time to be halfway through a semester and have COVID-19 hit. But I wasn't going to stop what I was doing. So I took this semester off. And quite honestly, I haven't picked up a book. I've got a full fall semester coming up in front of me. And as Andrea said, it's been a lot of email. It's been a lot of online conversations, a lot of strategy sessions. And I have, other than reading the few blogs that come across, I've been pretty much staying away from books until I have to pick up my final books later this summer and then into the fall.
Yeah, I'd just quickly chime in because I know we're running short on time, but it's been a time, I think, that just staying really close to all current events, and certainly a lot of my focus has been around the auto space. And I really, we all have a passion for the auto industry, and we're blessed to have so many great leaders in our industry. And the automotive community always comes together and rallies around a crisis. And it seems like all stakeholders have put effort into producing. Oftentimes it's a video, it's a Zoom meeting, it's a newsletter, it's a best practices guide. There's been a lot of sharing by industry leaders and organizations in our industry. And I really want to recognize NADA, our National Automobile Dealers Association, who I think has done some of their best work during this crisis as well in terms of being a resource to dealers. And I've taken time to read a lot of that content as it's become available, as well as staying in touch with a lot of industry leaders to compare notes as well. And even, our competitors, many of the business leaders, CEOs from the other large dealer groups have reached out, or vice versa, and we've all collaborated because we're all facing the same challenges. And I tend to just spend a lot of my time reading up on current events. I read multiple newspapers, a lot of online content. And then finally, I would say that I do love business books and leadership books. And I find myself at times like this reflecting back on some of my favorites and going back to leaders that maybe have faced crises or other business challenges and refreshing on some of the guidance that they've shared. And one of my favorites is a book called Execution. Another one I like that has a lot to do with communication in a team is a real simple book called The Speed of Trust. And those are a couple that I've consulted recently that I literally read years ago, but always have relevance and something that I look to from time to time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have a couple of minutes left here. I'm going to ask a very short question. I was going to ask you a question that was relevant to my research on perceptions of autonomous vehicles and micro-mobility solutions, but I think you've answered that. I think you're saying autonomous is not going to come as quickly as we might have anticipated. And micro-mobility, you know, e-scooters and whatnot doesn't seem super relevant to you. So I'm going to ask my question, which is relevant to my own personal interests. I'm just starting to think about how to invest money for my family's future. And so where would you invest right now? I know, Jeff, you said there's a lot of uncertainty, so maybe you wouldn't invest. Maybe you would just keep it in a safe instrument. There could be a second surge, et cetera. But if you had to invest right now, where would you put that money?
Well, I would never offer investment personally, financial investment unless I would invest. It looks like you've been an outstanding investor in your own development, in your own education, in your own career. And then you just mentioned the most important investment in all, your family. And you can't ever go wrong investing in any of those things. And I would refer you to a subject matter expert when it comes to financial advice, because I would certainly not profess to be one. But I am passionate about the auto industry, and whatever challenges the industry might face short term, I always think the auto industry is a great bet for the long-term future. And our industry is resilient, and it's always met challenges with innovation that has enabled the industry to persevere and get stronger and generate more profits for their shareholders and other tangible returns for all stakeholders.
Yeah, Robbie, I would tell you, we've got a chief investment officer. Her name is Lindsay Bell. She pushes out a ton of content, both on Twitter, as well as Ally's YouTube channel. And she's a great person to follow, gives great thought leadership around where to invest. I do think banks, and I think the airline industry is really suppressed right now. I can't imagine those are two places that aren't going to come back strong. I mean, the U.S. economy is so dependent on both. That I think watching the market on those two are interesting. But follow Lindsay. Like I said, great thought leader, and Lindsay Bell, great person to look at when you're looking for that kind of content.
I agree with both the other experts. Automotive, airlines, banking, can't go wrong.
Thank you so much. Let's close out here with Melissa, please.
Thank you so much to our audience, to Robbie for being a fantastic moderator, and of course to our fabulous panel. We appreciate you being with us today, and we look forward to providing you with future ComArtSci talks. Next week, we venture back into the world of sports, and we'll have a sports talk on Tuesday, June 30th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So please watch your inbox for a follow-up email and survey and other coming attractions. Thank you again, and go green.
Go White.